so it's really good for me to be able to see people. So, okay, then I know you're not asleep. So, I'm really pleased to be here. This is my 4th visit to Lutsk. I came here initially in 2011. Before I was elected, I worked as a cultural producer, as a cultural activist. I'm a poet and a theatre maker with a long history of engaging with community, using arts for social change. So I came here as part of a pan-European programme in 2011 and made a relationship with the Lutsk Jazz Club, and in fact then we were able to do a cooperation, which meant that my partner here from the Jazz Club, who's also is Elena, who has also been and spent time with me in the UK, and we both went to Brussels together to look at European values and European different policies and processes. So my journey really into politics and my continuing relationship with Lutsk has actually in a way always had this European perspective, which eventually saw me elected. So we were having an interesting conversation today. In fact, possibly, you know, part of my, maybe my political journey started here, I don't know, but maybe it did. So a little bit now about what I do now. So I was elected in May last year, in 2014, as a member of the Labour Party, which is a socialist party in the UK. So on the political spectrum, we are left. We are currently in opposition. We're in quite a lot of crisis, actually, if you're following politics back home. But then I think the whole world is in crisis, and there is a big crisis in terms of politics generally, in terms of citizenship and responsibility, in terms of government and cooperation and institutions. However, I stood as a candidate for the Labour Party in the northwest of England, which includes the large cities and urban conurbations of Manchester and Liverpool. And I say that to you because everybody knows Manchester. They know about the football teams, you kind of know about Liverpool because you know about the music scene. And you're from there, are you?
So, but can you speak slowly?
Slowly, yes, okay. Sorry, I'll try and slow down. So I represent 7 million people in the northwest region. Now I'm elected, and the region is not just the cities. It goes from the border with Wales, which, you know, if you know the geography of the United Kingdom, it goes from the border with Wales and it goes all the way up to the Scottish border, and it includes the very rural, mountainous area of Cumbria and the Lake District. So it is a huge geographical area and a huge number of people. My region also includes one of the largest ethnically diverse parts of the UK. There are many different nationalities in the cities. Manchester, I think, has more languages spoken than any other city in the world, except for Chicago, interestingly. More than London, I discovered. So that gives you some sense of the diversity. That is partly because of student population, but it's also because the North has always been a place to welcome refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, going way back to the time of the Irish famine, the Irish potato famine, when many Irish people left Ireland because they were starving and hungry, and they came to Manchester. So the city always is very welcoming to others. But the region has also been settled by a very, very large Asian population. So I represent a huge number of Muslim constituents, and I work very, very closely with the Muslim community. This is particularly important at the minute because of the rise of Islamophobia because of the rise of hate crime, because of the difficulties that we're having within our society about othering and about diversity. And my background always taught me to be very open and tolerant and respectful of other people. And throughout my whole time in running my arts organisation, I was making intercultural exchange programs with people from all around the world. So it's what I do. So it's really good to be able to do that in a stronger political way now. In the Parliament, I'm on 3 committees. Now, you have to forgive me if you already, I will assume that you don't know very much, and maybe you do know something, but the Parliament has 20 standing committees, and I'm on 3 of them. I'm on one main committee, which is culture and education, but it also includes, culture includes sport and media, which includes to some extent journalism, and it also includes citizenship. The education part of my portfolio doesn't include statutory education. So where a sovereign nation has its own education policy about statutory education, where children have to go to school, the EU isn't able to influence that very much, unless it's influencing on an issue around human rights or fundamental rights. So, for example, on access to education for disabled children, for example, we can make recommendations, and we can make recommendations about training, teacher training. We can make recommendations about programs that happen outside of school. But the education portfolio very much includes informal education, vocational training, university, anything that's about further education and higher education as well. My own background actually is that as a teenager, I was a complete failure. I failed everything. Okay? Not because I was stupid, but probably because I asked a lot of questions and I was awkward. And school was a very containing. It was a very containing place, and I had lived a very nomadic life. So I had an interesting view of the world, but I wasn't able to really fit in with a lot of very sort of prescribed curriculum subjects. So I went to university when I was 52. I'd never been to university before, and I actually didn't even have any I had no qualifications. Other than that, I'd been running my own company for 25 years. I had actually taught at university. I'd been published in the Guardian newspaper. And I'd had a Churchill Fellowship to study and work abroad, and a Commonwealth studentship to do projects in Australia. And this is all because I'm a very hands-on grassroots person who kind of just went out there and did stuff, okay? And it's really interesting. I never thought I could go to university, and a friend of mine said, actually you can go, and what you should do is just go and do a master's. Just go straight in and do a master's, because I didn't really have the luxury of doing a first degree in terms of time or money, because by then I was running a business, I'd got children, and I'd already in a way explored that kind of world through my work. So I did a master's in education and international development at Newcastle University, which was a very practical course, where in fact I learned, the course was really about economics, poverty, education, human rights. I would say that's really what my course was about. And it gave me a really good kind of position from which to have the confidence to stand for elected office. I think I always knew I wanted to stand up for people and speak for vulnerable communities and for people who didn't have a voice, but actually it's quite good to have that grounding and that background, and some of them actually have had been able to been able to make strong arguments for things, and certainly that's what university was able to teach me. And my course required me to do a project abroad, and I spent 3 months in Brazil. I took 4 young people to Brazil to volunteer for 3 months on an international arts project in one of the poorest parts of Brazil, in Belém, which is where the Amazon comes out to the ocean. It's a very mixed community of indigenous and Brazilians from European background, but Europeans from African backgrounds. Massive problems, beautiful place, but very, very poor. So anyway, so I was just talking about education there. My other committees are gender equality and women's rights. There's also a little story here. That's one of the issues that gave me the motivation and the courage to stand. When I was selected to stand for my party, I'd only been a member of the party for 18 months. So it's quite extraordinary. I never expected to be, I didn't have this long history of being in the party. And one of the reasons why I decided to put my name forward was because of the rape of Yayoti Del Singh on the bus in Delhi in December 2012. That story made me very upset, made me very angry. I felt I just couldn't, it's incomprehensible that we can be in the 21st century and that kind of violence still exists. And what it did for us back home in the UK was it made a lot of people talk about the issue. So we realised it wasn't just something happening in India and another country, that actually this kind of situation is something that is happening all around the world, and there's a big stigma attached to it. People won't talk about it. And I joined, so it's that gave me the courage to put my name down, and then I actually forgot about it. I just forgot because I thought nobody's ever going to pick me. At the same time, I got really involved in a global campaign called 1 Billion Rising. I don't know how many of you know about that, but I would urge you to find out about it. It's an amazing international global campaign that recognises that 1 billion women globally are affected by sexual violence. And on February the 14th every year, men and women take actions all around the world to combat that and raise awareness of it. So actually, I thought that's where my path was going to go. I thought my path was going to go in that kind of activism and not in a political route. But in fact, what happened is that I was asked to go for an interview, and I was asked first of all to be a reserve on a list because they liked me, but I didn't really have much political experience. And then at the last minute, somebody dropped out, and then I was asked to join the list and to be part of the campaigning team. That was a year before the election, and a year later I found myself elected. I tell people the story because certainly in my country, it's very unusual for people like me to achieve the position I've achieved. Often elections, I wouldn't say elections are fixed back home, but in terms of antidates, there's almost like a route that you go through, and as you can see, I didn't come through that normal route. Anyway, but the gender equality issue, the issue about women's rights has been really, really important for me. So I love being on that committee. It's a substitute committee, so it means that you don't do it as a priority. However, I do it full on, and because I'm very active in the committee, I get given loads of responsibility. So I was the party's spokesperson on FGM, on female genital mutilation. I opened an exhibition in the Parliament about that. I managed to persuade a newspaper back home to do a big feature on it, made links with campaigning groups about the issue. And so the more you do, the more you're given responsibility. So I've been really lucky to go on fem missions to Stockholm, where if those of you who might be following politics will realise there's a really fantastic government in Stockholm. There's a really wonderful social social policy that really looks after people. It's a very equal society, and it was fantastic to be there, meeting grassroots campaigners as well as politicians. And the government there have called themselves a feminist government, and it's a government of men and women, but they're very feminist, which is wonderful. I also went on a mission to Rome, where we were talking with politicians, ministers, government ministers, various people from all around the world about any progress that's been made since the Beijing platform, which was a very big coming together of women to talk about gender equality. And actually the feeling was that we've gone back rather than progressed. And I went to Geneva to a summit on the Information Society and women's involvement in that, where I was there with women from various parties. We were there as a cross-party group. And there was a session about gender equality, and it was all men on the panel, which is ridiculous. In fact, as a group of women campaigners, we all started tweeting madly to shame them into action, and by the afternoon they changed the panel, and there were women on the panel. So I've made a pledge, actually, that I won't ever speak on a panel, or I won't host a panel, I won't support a panel if it's all male, that we have to have some equality there between men and women in terms of visibility. My other committee is called Regional Development, and it's really about infrastructure money and social fund money that goes to the poorest regions of the member states. It's very sad that that money cannot come to the Ukraine. You're not a member state. Hopefully one day you will be, and then you can have regional development money. But it really supports infrastructure. It supports universities, it supports employability projects, social projects, and a whole range of lots of transport infrastructure like railway systems and all sorts of other things. So I'm on those three committees, and then Parliament also gives us the opportunity to be members of what's called intergroups, and this is where parliamentarians see that there's a need for something that isn't included within a committee. And I think there's about 20 or 30 intergroups, and my main intergroups are children's rights. I co-founded a children's rights group in the Parliament, and I'm working with children and young people so that they can come into the Parliament and help policymakers and politicians shape policy so it's more child-friendly. I'm also on an intergroup for anti-poverty, for the social economy, for youth, for LGBTI issues, for tourism, cultural industries, lifelong learning. So there's a whole range of other things that I get involved in. Each parliamentarian has official responsibility for relationships with other countries. My other countries are Bosnia, Herzegovina and Kosovo, and I've just been volunteering in Bosnia for 12 days on a youth project in Srebrenica, and I've also spent 2 days in Kosovo, in Pristina. Actually, and this is not official, I've done this in my free time, partly because the official delegations, when they make the official delegations, it's elected representatives talking to elected representatives. So what you will never get in the official delegation is grassroots level, community involvement, civil society. So I've made a specific move to have a relationship with people outside of government, and that's why I've spent my summer in these countries. I'm a substitute on relations with Africa, Caribbean and Pacific countries, where there are subgroups, and I have responsibility for social and environmental issues. So I think that's probably everything about my response. So, just thinking. So there's two more things, yeah, in the Parliament, and then maybe I'll stop because people might want to ask questions. I'm one of two, there are 751 MEPs in the Parliament. I'm one of two who is a link with the UN Council on Disabilities. Oh yeah, I'm in the disability intergroup, yeah, I forgot that. But, so, and I'm a link with the UN Council on Disability. And my organisation, before I was elected, worked very, very closely with a lot of disabled people. And I ran a disability arts organisation for the whole of the north of England some years ago. So, did a European education training programme about employment and disability rights. And I'm also an MEP ambassador for mental health. So that's kind of all my official responsibilities. I'm going to stop, okay, because I'm sure you have questions, or maybe I didn't understand, so maybe you didn't understand, or I spoke too quickly, or you want clarification.